Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Estrella Consulting Star Pass webinar. We are excited tonight to have Warren Blazy III with us, and I'm going to let Warren do a small introduction in just a second, but I did want to just give a little bit of information to you about us. This is part of a Star Pass webinar series that we do. We actually host webinars pretty much monthly with people in interesting careers or careers that we think would be something that maybe is not so clear in terms of how do you get to do that. And this is geared towards high school students, but certainly parents, school counselors, independent consultants. If there are people watching this that work with teens, this is for you. I also want to encourage you to check out our Estrella YouTube channel because we do have other webinars that we do multiple monthly on all different kinds of topics, everything from campus visits to financial aid to test prep and everything in between. So make sure that you check out the Estrella Consulting YouTube channel. And I'm Christina Dooley, and I am the founder of Estrella Consulting, which is a full service college planning firm based in Ohio, but we work with students across the country and around the world that are navigating the college search process. And we've been doing that for several decades. And again, we're excited to have our guest tonight, who actually happens to be a very longtime friend of mine. So I'm happy that he said yes to the invitation. As people know, if you've watched our Star Pass webinars in the past, oftentimes we invite people that we actually are connected to because we have been able to see their journey along the way and see all the cool things that they're doing and how they got there. And so we want to share that journey and that information with you. So without further ado, Warren, if you would just take a second and introduce yourself and share a little bit about your role at CB Richard Ellis and tell us exactly, you don't need to tell us your pathway yet because we'll get there. But tell us what do you do? What's your job?
Yeah, no, Christina, I appreciate it. And a great opportunity too. I'm glad you do this. I think so often being able to help people, or when you're younger, you don't really see that path ahead so clearly, right? And sometimes you put pressure on yourself. So I'm happy to do this because you don't know what advice or what things we've learned through our journey can help that next person that's, coming up as they're focusing on their careers. So as you mentioned, I'm Warren Blazy. Actually, over 20 years with CBRE. So we're a commercial real estate firm. I kind of use the simplest terms of, instead of representing people and houses, we represent corporations, and traditionally office buildings can be industrial, things like that. So if you're in a downtown environment, lots, if you see, a sign of a company, Salesforce up on a tower, that building's actually owned by someone else, traditionally not Salesforce or whoever the entity is on it, and they're leasing it. So our role is to either help the company and evaluate the market and understand what opportunities are out there and act on their behalf as they look to make new office space, or we represent the owners of the building in those situations where we're navigating the marketplace, understanding who's out there, and trying to position our asset for that ownership as best we can.
I think now that people have heard that, I know my experience when you started working in this space, I know I started noticing the signage, for example, because I see your name on it in the Cleveland area or the Akron area, for example. So I think, like to your point, I think people don't realize that that's how the process works. And so thank you for clarifying that for us. So tell us a little bit, obviously, so Warren and I actually go way back. I mentioned we've known each other for a long time. We both attended the same undergraduate institution, Hiram College here in Ohio. But Warren, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you ended up choosing what you ended up studying at Hiram? And I know why you went to Hiram or how you found Hiram, but maybe share a little bit about that too.
Yeah, no, one of the things I think is important is I'm a firm believer that you're not born with confidence. Confidence is a skill you develop. So, to your point, for me, my parents and I went to Hiram College. So, and I worked at Hiram College in high school. It was a small town. So, for me, it was as easy going from middle school to high school as it was going from high school to college. That doesn't mean that it's right for everybody. And, I wish I would have gone to an Arizona State or, Colorado, but I don't think at that time I was ready or had the confidence to do that. So for me, that small school, that intimate setting, something I was familiar with, was really the perfect launching pad for that. And then the other thing too is I don't know that, I didn't know what commercial real estate was when I was in college. So I was actually fascinated at the time, more from psychology of how people, you know, if someone was working out, keep in mind this is 20 years ago, but if someone was working out or trying to improve their health, everybody was supportive of that. You'd get help for that, and people were, encouraging that journey. I was always fascinated that you can have just as much struggles from a mental or emotional stress or hurdles, but that at that time, it's really changed now, which is good. But at that time, there is a stigma against getting psychological help or seeing that. And I really saw that connection with people. And so I actually went with 2 degrees when I was at college, focusing. My parents were both in business. My mentor was from business, so that was an easy one. But then I was always fascinated with psychology, so I really didn't know until I graduated which one I was going to focus on. And I will tell you that I had a great counselor that told me our senior year and said, "Look, Warren, I know you want to get a major in both. To do what you want to do in psychology, you do not need to have a bachelor's. You're going to need a master's and PhD. To get into a master's, you need a degree. You don't need to have that." He's like, "You're going to have to do an animal behavior clinical study, and you're going to have to do another senior seminar." He's like, "I know you. Go enjoy life, enjoy being in college, get your minor in that, get your major in business, and then whatever you choose, you can." And that was some of the best advice, because I think when we're young, we could put pressure on ourselves to know those answers or to make sure we're doing everything. But you then sometimes miss the moment of what that college experience is and giving yourself a chance to develop in that.
I think you made a really good point about the value of having trusted advisors or mentors or somebody who, which I don't think a lot of college students take advantage of. It's, asking questions, talking to people, getting a real it sounds like they were really reflecting on who you were and maybe seeing things that maybe you didn't even really fully see at that point in time. And so that was, I think, pretty valuable advice. So when you graduated from Hiram, tell us, what did you do next? Was it immediately you went into commercial real estate? What did you do when you graduated?
No, I think that's what's important too, is you don't know, sometimes you don't know what that path forward is, and that's okay, right? So, it is a journey that you're on. So for me, as I mentioned before, I had a mentor in business, and it was my dad's best friend growing up. So I called him my Uncle Mike. When I graduated high school, he gave me a book, The Richest Man of Babylon, told me to read this and then come back to him. When I came back to him, he gave me the book, The Power of Focus, and told me, read this, then come back to me. Came back and he gave me a audio tape, cassette tape that actually I, if I was a little bit taller, could grab it. It sits on my bookshelf. It's The Psychology of Winning, and there was 8 cassette tapes. He's like, read this and listen. So for me, I had that mentorship from him, and it inspired me to want to go more an entrepreneurial path. And at the time when we were graduating in 2000, technology was a huge opportunity. Ironically, you didn't need the facilities, you didn't need the people. If you had an idea or a thought, you could create a company or a business from that. So I really connected with that and really wanted to get in on the internet and technology. At the time, my senior seminar for business was studying the differences as Amazon, Borders, and Barnes and Noble each took a different approach to the online growth that was happening. Amazon was obviously all in. Borders was traditional bookstore, and Barnes and Noble tried to balance them both. So for me, that entrepreneurial spirit was very real. Got into technology, and ironically, sometimes timing you just can't control, right? So you might remember there was that tech bubble in 2000, and
Mhm.
it's kind of 2001 that kind of had an impact there. 9/11 was followed shortly behind that. So I was working with a couple different groups, a couple different more entrepreneurial. We had some really good things going on, but at the end of the day, although we had a lot of activity, there wasn't something coming out that I felt was going to be sustainable. I was going to be turning 25 or 26, and I was concerned I was going to be locked into an industry that wasn't going to be growing. Ironically, technology made a huge rebound, but again, you don't know that at the time.
Right.
So I had gone out and looked at, kind of 3 different jobs, right? One was the traditional manufacturing, our area in Northeast Ohio, very strong in that. How can I get in a sales role there? Obviously, I think a lot of people either think pharmaceutical or medical device sales. So I interviewed with a medical device company. And truthfully, I don't know what it was. And this is kind of the unique part of what happens in life, is sometimes things just organically happen that you don't understand. I did not understand fully what commercial real estate was. I knew that I did not want to be in residential real estate, but I felt, even though I had limited knowledge of what it meant, I thought to myself, I'm like, man, I'd be working with C-suite or executives of companies, helping them with real estate, and that would help expose me to so many different companies, so many different stories, so many different nuances within business. And then on the owner side, I'd be meeting a lot of owners and investors and different people. And I thought, if I'm going to put myself in the best position moving forward, the stability of a skill that I could count on, that no matter what ups and downs or choices I made, having a skill in commercial real estate would always be a platform. And then if I wanted to take chances later on in being an entrepreneur, I'd be in a much better position. So CBRE at the time, and it's a longer story how I ended up back there, but they had posted a junior position on their website and interviewed there and had an opportunity to join as a junior broker, their top agency team in Cleveland. And that would have been 21 years ago now.
So do you think looking back, and you mentioned, if you could go back, you might have maybe would have chosen a different educational pathway, or not necessarily major, but institution. So now that you work in this space, and obviously I think you probably work with people who have all kinds of varied backgrounds in terms of where they studied and what they studied and how they got to where they are. But now that you've been in the space and you've moved up significantly over the years, do you think that it matters where someone goes to undergraduate if they're interested in pursuing a career like yours in commercial real estate? Does it matter? And if not, are there other things that matter more?
Well, and I think I like to compare things to working out, right? There's a million different workouts, a million different ways to do something. You find what connects best with you, and that's going to put you in the best position. So, yeah, in hindsight, had I known I wanted to be in commercial real estate, there's great programs at University of Cincinnati. There's a top school in Wisconsin, that really have curriculum designed around commercial real estate. So you'd get your degree in business, but you'd have a strong area of study in that. And people in our industry do look for that. And it's no different than if you were going to be a chemical engineer, you'd probably look at a school like Case that has great engineering. And going to those schools does help. But there's also something to be said too, if you don't know what you're looking to do, and I mentioned to you before too, having just as much of an interest in psychology. For people that don't know, I really think it's okay not to know. And sometimes putting yourself in a position in a school that's smaller, like a Hiram College, that gives you a chance, liberal arts school gives you a chance to touch a lot of different things, see things, and as I mentioned, develop confidence. You're going to make yourself successful. There are going to be different paths that can change that or impact it. So, if I was given any advice, if you know 100% what you want to do, then definitely being in a school that can align with that, that has alumni that are connected to that, that you can lean into those resources and things like that. But don't ever think because you're not focused on something that you can't make a career out of it.
That's awesome advice. I would say that that's something that we echo to a lot of our students who, the reality is a lot of high school kids right now feel like they need to know exactly what their life trajectory looks like when they're 13, 14, 15 years old, and obviously, as we know, they haven't experienced anything at that point in time, really. So really, how would you know exactly what you would want to be doing in terms of a long-term career? So thinking back,
Well, real quick too, think about
yeah,
that. You mentioned like they don't know where they want to be. They know they should feel pressure to be here.
yeah.
That almost never changes, right? Like if you're a parent, you feel like you should be doing this. If you're in a relationship, you should be doing this. On finance, you feel like you should be at this position. So there are pressures that we self-imply on ourselves that make us feel frustrated because then we feel there's a difference between where we are and where we want to be. So I would
Mhm.
just caution young people, it happens as you get older too. No matter what, there's always going to be that where you are and where you want to be, and the difference between those two creates stress or frustration. But know that that's always something you have to deal with, always something you have to actively work on, and know that being in the present moment is the best thing you can do. Plan for the future, learn from the past, but put yourself in the present so you can enjoy the moment as best you can.
That's really great advice, Warren. And I think that's also something. I think parents should hear too, that they, for themselves and their children, to remember that. And as an example, right, we're recording this and it's summertime, and we have a lot of students who are rising seniors who are working on their college applications, but we also want to be really aware that it's summer, and to your point about being present also in other aspects of life, being a teenager, enjoying family time, all these things, like you said, things will come, not without hard work, but it doesn't mean that you can't take time to do those things that, if they're reflecting back, and as some days saying, gosh, I wish I would have done this, or I wish would have taken the time, or parents saying, I wish I would have let my teen, have a little bit of just being a kid. And I think there is so much pressure to know adult things and know, what their whole life looks like when they're so young. And I like that you're saying, even as adults, I always joke with my students, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. Like you got lots of runway left. So life can change in a second, and you can have lots of things. I mean, I think the pandemic showed a lot of people that too, that there's, you got to be a little bit flexible and willing and open to try new things. So thinking about like if coming into something like going into commercial real estate, certainly, like you said, there are programs that we know of that students can go and study. But if they don't necessarily land in one of those programs as an undergrad, but they're in a college setting and they're able to be actively doing things, do you have recommendations? So, as an example, I'm assuming maybe CB Richard Ellis, that you guys have interns at some point in time, like maybe there's interns around. What are the things that those students are doing right that are helpful for them? Are there skill sets that they bring to the table? Are there attitudes? What is it that would make someone catch your eye or make you think, gosh, that's somebody I'd want on my team once they graduate, or later on? So what are those things, if they don't necessarily have that degree in commercial real estate, or they're not in a real estate program, what would be the other things?
Yeah, actually, this is very ironic because right now we have two interns on our direct team. And the one actually, our managing director had posted on LinkedIn about an internship. She actually was focused on medical device sales. Her dad was in the industry for 20 years, and she saw that post and kind of read it and thought, maybe I'll give this a try. Her interview, honestly, she killed it. I mean, she just knew she wanted something in life. You don't have to know what you want, but you have to know that you're going to go out there and you're going to give it your all. And I just felt like she wanted to prove to herself and, what she was going to do in life. It wouldn't matter with her mentality. You can teach a skill, you can't teach a mentality. So it
Hmm.
wasn't like it was like I'm a go, 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 but there was a silent confidence there that you knew that if given the right environment and given a chance to excel, that this would be someone to take a chance on, and it made it easy. And that's been incredibly experiencing for me too, like being able to give to that next generation, starting to
Hmm.
mentor, seeing their excitement, right? Like, and they bring energy. So that's another thing too, is like if you're in an intern, sometimes it's going to be boring. Sometimes there's going to be times that you're going to be frustrated that you're not feeling like you're in connection with everything, and that's okay. Each and every day when you come and bring that energy, you bring that enthusiasm, there's a complete misnomer that I hate hearing, and I think it's generational. Oh, that next generation, they're just not excited. I, I'll tell you, you go talk to the two people that are on our team right now that are in college, and I'm more excited for the future, not only of commercial real estate, especially in the Great Lakes 15, 20 years ago when we were graduating. It was a harder time. Jobs were leaving, people left. This next generation, and I'm really well connected within the industry with other interns. Bedrock's a major developer, owns the Cavs, Dan Gilbert, Rocket Mortgage. I've met with their interns. I mean, you want to talk about people that are just excited. So that energy and enthusiasm, and it's going to be tough, but both of our interns have already asked and are going to be working during their school years to continue. The other thing I'll say too, and this is more for people in a position of mentoring or hiring people, if you're looking at an internship to bring diversity, you have to invest in that person differently too. You can't expect that person to have your same mindset, to have your same mentality, and think that they're going to be successful. So we're very, very lucky. We have someone that was born in China. She was adopted. She's actually a sophomore. She's going to Case. She is brilliant. She doesn't have the background in business. Not let me
Mhm.
rephrase it. She doesn't have the background in sales that our other intern had just from being around her dad and growing up and going to these meetings. But it's one of those that we know that if you foster that, you give her a chance. I mean, she just can see too many things. She works too many hours. And what's also a little bit different is she's a sophomore. She did a spring internship. She really liked commercial real estate, but didn't know how to fit it in her schedule. When she interviewed, she's like, I would really like to do a spring internship. And we thought, sure, why not? And if it works out well, then she can come back her junior year and do a full internship. So I think if you're in a position there, you have to empower someone to be successful and understand that everybody doesn't learn the same, and then be flexible on both ends, right? If you want an internship, go do one as a sophomore for 18 hours for 8 weeks during a spring semester if your schedule allows.
Right.
And just think different and try to get internships at different places. Try one in Chicago, apply for one in New York. Like, don't think that you have to get an internship where you're at, because there's housing and there's opportunities to do something different. So again, if you're feeling like you have that opportunity or desire, definitely think differently and try to put yourself in the best position.
There's three things that you talked about that I want to touch on. One, I agree with you 100% that there is a big misperception I think about, and like you said, it's this stereotype or myth about the generation coming up now. We love my students. I have some of the most motivated kids, who are excited to learn. They want to try things. They're not lazy. I think I totally agree with you. I think we need to have some trust and faith in this generation that is right now, go especially those that are in college. The other thing that you mentioned, which resonates a lot with me, is at one point in time I read the book The Nordstrom Way, and it's basically the story of Nordstrom. And one of the things that they talk about is when they do their training for their employees, their motto is hire the smile, train the skill, because there's certain things that, like to your point, you can't you you can't really train some of those things, in terms of a person's personality, their drive, all of those, that kind of stuff. The skill you can train. They may not have it, but that's where they're there, especially if they're coming in as an intern. They're there because they want to learn, and sometimes
Yeah.
those students will be your best employees down the line because you're bringing them out early enough that they can learn and want to just keep progressing through. So I think that's really important. The last thing I wanted to ask was, in terms of internships, I 100% agree. I tell students all the time, even my high school kids that are going through, the college application process, and they're kind of exploring what they might want to study. I tell them, talk to people that are in those careers, find out the real deal about that job, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what certain jobs entail, and a lot of times, students are either so compensation driven, or they're looking at it as, the end goal is in a monetary sense, versus the experience and also what it takes to actually get to that point. And so I tell them, even if you're just having conversations with maybe your parents' friends who are in that industry that you're thinking of, it doesn't have to be a full on internship, but spend some time with, have a cup of coffee with them, set up a
Yeah.
15-minute Zoom. You don't have to go full out, but just learn. And we actually, some people may feel like it's a little bit premature, but we encourage our students, in their junior, senior year of high school, to actually start creating LinkedIn accounts, because as they meet people in industries, they can start building that network. And then who knows, down the line, they may get into sophomore year of college and say, oh, I met with so and so. I'm going to reach back out and see what kind of internship opportunities exist in that space for me. So when you guys are hiring interns, or maybe a recommendation from you would be that, like, for example, your company, you have somewhere that you're posting those and students can apply. I assume you maybe do some recruitment somewhere. Is that a thing with your company? Do you guys go and recruit on college campuses? How does that work?
Yeah, I think there's three ways that, at least in my small experience, that I'm learning. One, we did do it wasn't called a career day, but it was or a job fair. But basically, Case was hosting professional service firms on there, everything from accounting firms, to finance groups and we took part in that. So it was a speed dating thing. And I'll be honest, I was proactive. There was a couple people there that didn't have any interest in commercial real estate that I reached out to and were like, hey, you got some skill sets here. You may not be thinking of this, but would welcome a chance to have further conversation. So that's where we met our spring internship. The one that I mentioned that we just hired this summer, that was through a network and obviously a LinkedIn post and went through a full interview process. That one, there was an open listing within CBRE under Cleveland. They, put in their application. They went through internally. There was a, coming to like a top five that was initially our HR department whittled down the list. Then our management and some of our key people took that list from 20 down to five. And then a group of three of us interviewed the five or six that were there. So the traditional process is there. And then I will tell you, to your point too, the network of internal coworkers will inevitably have someone say, hey, so and so, I'm friends with their parents, has someone who's interested in commercial real estate. Could you consider this resume, or would you meet with this person and see if they'd be a good fit? So I'd say there's three things. I mean, leveraging your network there, applying and being the traditional process and going through the application, and then being active and going to career fairs or opportunities like that where, this was a speed dating one. So to your point, you may not know what you want, but all of a sudden you're talking to someone different. It may just open your eyes a little bit, for that.
That's great. I think that's great advice. Are there any myths that you feel like you hear about your industry in terms of people being successful in commercial real estate? Is there anything that frustrates you or anything that you feel like that's just not true about this industry?
I think you mentioned before the transactions, and I think that's a misnomer in most sales or professional roles is you get transactional based. So in commercial real estate, there's our big significant deals. I could look out my window right now in downtown Cleveland and see Sherwin-Williams' new headquarters being built. Yes, that was a big commission to that team that did that, or someone who did, Key Bank I represented for years down here. Some of those big deals are, and they bring value transactionally, but no one
Mhm.
ever asks you all the small deals that you had to do, or how many times you worked on a project for a year, 2 years that never went anywhere too. So I think that in all sales profession, there's oh, I can make this much. What's your biggest commission? It's a long process. You have to believe in what you're doing and create the right process and system for yourself and believe that if you do that a long enough timeline, you'll be successful. And in those
Mhm.
scenarios, you're not worried about your quota. You're not worried about how big that commission was or if you got that promotion. So I think not just in commercial real estate, but in any industry, focusing on the transaction is going to be short lived. And if you want to put yourself in the best position, focus on the long term development of your skill, your process, and putting yourself in the best position to be successful.
And it's probably a lot of relationships too. I imagine that you are building relationships along the way too with the people that you're interacting. I mean, sales isn't just like you said, it's not just transactional. It is actually developing longer term ties probably with some of your best customers, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely. And there is a misconception. I, coming from a smaller school, did not like networking. I found it to be not more fake, but not as genuine. And there is a huge difference between building connections and networking. And if,
Hmm.
well, you have to build a network first before you can develop those connections. But
Hmm.
the sooner you can get involved in different trade groups, different organizations, different ways of contributing, that's the one thing. It doesn't matter if you're going, I was blessed to graduate recently from Leadership Cleveland. I'm on the Greater Akron Chamber Board where I was a judge for the Future 30, or if it's being an intern. Develop commitment and passion outside of your work that goes to contributions in your community. Volunteer at the Red Cross. Go help the homeless. Do, a food bank. A food bank's such an easy thing to check. But I found that there's not one organization, no matter where you're at success wise, that they don't want to see that you're passionate about something else or involved in something else too. So, something that I wish I would have done at a much younger age was get actively involved in contributing and giving back.
I love that. That's great advice. Well, I promised that we would keep this short for our audience and for you because I want to be respectful of your time. But the last thing I always like to ask our guests is for you, what has been your proudest moment in your career? And it's a loaded because it's a big question.
No, no, and it's really easy. And I appreciate that you're asking this because it goes to what we were talking about before. We are all blessed to have the careers, the businesses, the network that we have, but those are transactional. Those don't have meaning beyond providing stability for your family. Yes, those are important, things like that. But that opportunity to be involved, to give back, to be part of your community, that's something in commercial real estate that I really get to do a lot of. And there's a sense of fulfillment that I would have never understood when I was younger, that if you're blessed to be in a position that your career can grow, that you can invest in your community, to be on nonprofit boards, to be on the board of my college, to be on the board of a crisis nursery, to be on the board of Downtown Cleveland Inc. There's a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment that goes far beyond transactions. So my career has blessed me with financial success, but that platform has allowed me to give back. And that giving back is 10 times more meaningful than any deal I'll ever close. And that opportunity to be in that position is just incredible. So my proudest moments is the fact that I was able to have that moment, and it's nothing that I would ever known when I was younger that's there. But I hope for anybody that hears that, that there's that moment of fulfillment that you get when you know that you're in a place of giving.
I think that is fantastic advice for everyone. And I think it's a perfect spot for us to end our discussion. I'm so happy that you were able to join me. I actually learned quite a bit about you and I learned a little more about your
Surprised you from
job.
my college days,
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, exactly.
I
But
am
that's
coachable.
okay. Yeah, there you go. But thank you, Warren, your advice, just all of these great snippets of wisdom. I think, again, are totally relevant for both students, but I think also, like I said, a lot of the adults that are watching this, we have a lot of counselors and other parents that will be watching. I think it will resonate with many people. So I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for joining me tonight, and I appreciate all that you're doing and all the service, like you said, all the service that work that you do, which I know you do because it is, like you said, very fulfilling, and it's appreciated across the board, I'm sure, by all the different organizations that you've touched. So thanks on behalf of all of us at Estrella, and thanks for being our guest. Enjoy the rest of your
Absolutely.
night. All right,
Thank you.
thanks,
You
Lauren.
too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.